Construction project manager interview questions and answers. First of all, let me signpost. In the description, I will give you a full list of interview questions and the proper answers. I love that. I'm also going to link you to our project manager board. But in this video, from a content standpoint, I want to talk to you about what makes a great PM and how you can interview for a great project manager. And so if you're interested in that, please stay with us on this video. So a project manager really needs to know how to build a team and how to supply the project with amazing resources. So obviously some of your questions in your interview are going to center around that. Now, you're interviewing a project manager in this video, or you want to know what questions you're going to be asked. So we're in luck. You can't hire a superintendent in construction from another company and get what you want, but you may be able to with a project manager. So the interview is very, very important here. I always say for field builders, you have to build them yourself. But for a project manager, you a lot of times can get somebody that is pretty decent because of a couple of different reasons. Because it's really centered around support and systems and project management training, which the industry is not bad at. The other thing is that there is a lot of resources out there available. So I think that the support systems for PMs are a little bit advanced. And that's why at Elevate Construction, we're spending most of our time for field positions because they're doing a great job, but they don't have that same level of support. Now, let me be clear about this. If you hire, you're guessing. When you terminate, you know. I don't like the thought of terminating people. I do like the lean concept of hiring for life, if possible, but sometimes you're not a fit. So Gary Vee, one of my favorite influencers, says when you hire, you're guessing. When you fire, you know. So you are guessing at best, but the key here is you got to make sure a couple things are there. Number one, you've got to make sure that person is culturally aligned. Whatever the core values are for your company, you've got to ask questions in that direction. And not questions like, oh, this is our core value. Do you meet that? They're going to be like, yes. Ask them what's important to them. What are their core values? And many times what I'll do is I'll take the company's core values and I will write there what the person's telling me and see if I can align them. The other thing that I want to ask them is their philosophy about construction and specifically how they feel about trade partners and workers. I am looking very specifically to sense how they feel about workers, foremen, and trades. If they're like, well, you know, trades, you do your best, but they're a bunch of dummies, you know. Or if you get the sense that they look down on the Gemba, the boots on the ground, the Gemba people, then you know they're not a right fit. A great project manager will know this main question: what do you need? And that project manager will get the project what the project needs. And so if that project manager doesn't understand that, we've got a massive problem. The other questions that we need to understand center around humble, hungry, and smart. And I love doing this for project managers because Patrick Lencioni's work is phenomenal. The ideal team player, humble, hungry, smart, he actually has a test that you can buy that evaluates the person, and actually we can give them to you if you want, some checklists for the questions that you ask. But you want to ask questions that indicate, and by the way, I'll link this in the description below, that indicate whether or not they're hungry, meaning they have a drive in their career, humble, meaning that they're willing to do lower level work and support the Gemba, and that they are smart, which means not smart intellectually, but smart with people. And so you might ask some questions like, how have you dealt with a challenge? What's been your biggest team challenge and how did you resolve it, right? These are really good questions that you can ask. I really want to get a feel for those things right out of the gate. I like the Southwest method of basically having them solve a problem right away. Instead of saying, what would you do in this question or in this situation, or what is your philosophy on it, but basically say, okay, we're going to role play right now. I am a project engineer on the team that doesn't get along with the superintendent who's been very condescending. We don't like working together and there's been an office breakdown. What would you do right now? Let's do it right now. Literally do it in the interview, asking how they would resolve it right in the moment gives you an insight into their soul a little bit. And those are my mains, but let me give you some more specific questions here that I think you'll absolutely love. You'll want to ask some questions that reveal their experience in leadership. Like, tell me about a project that you led from start to finish and the results. You might also ask some questions that center around leadership style and culture. culture. Like, how would you describe your leadership style? Maybe you want to ask some questions that center around lean and collaboration and say, when stakeholders disagree or trades disagree, how would you build consensus and get everybody on the same page? Or questions around decision making where you can say, tell me about a decision that you made that didn't work out. You know, one of the ones that is really kind of cliche is tell me about your biggest weakness. And I see, you know, LinkedIn and YouTube and Facebook influencers saying they don't like that. But if you're like, hey, what is your biggest weakness? And they're like, oh, I'm just such a perfectionist, you know, like it's like such a completely BS answer. Like that is a really good insight into their soul, because like we all have problems. And if you ask me what my problem, I can just tell you right there like that I try to be a nice guy, but when somebody pushes up against me, I can go into like Jason Kaboom, like I can get my ego triggered right away. And then I get really like authoritative. I get into this spot where I want it done my way, but I also want people to like me, and I can get very confusing about how I direct. And my best self is when I'm actually being supportive and collaborative and kind. So if I get into directive mode, like I'm going to tell you what to do mode, I am not at my best. I know that about myself, and if I get into that mode, I can be very toxic to work with. If your PM that you're interviewing doesn't have a real like story version of themselves of that, knowing their weakness, then that can be a problem. That leads to like a lack of insight. As much as you can look back at past experience and as much as you can have them talk about real stories and show real results, the better off you're going to be. So I hope this has been helpful. You're really going to love looking at the description where I've got some of these tools posted for you, and please check out that PM board. But at the end of the day, a project manager there is to resource that project and to build that team. And that person has got to be good with people and be able to read the owner's minds and really deliver a remarkable experience with people. And if you get the sense that they can't do that and that you're not culturally aligned, then those are some red flags. I hope you've enjoyed this video. On we go.